Okay.
Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today, and welcome to this commercialisation talk run by postdocs at Cambridge CARES. I can see a few new names here, so if this is your first time, then a special welcome to you. If you are a Create researcher, then I'm sure you've heard of Cambridge CARES. We're one of the Create entities. Most of our work is related to decarbonising Singapore's chemical industry. Just to let you know that I'll be recording the workshop, but I'll crop out everyone except the speaker view, or maybe I'll leave you on if you've got questions. So yeah, just to be aware of that. So yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce Vishvak Kannan today. So it's great to have Vishvak with us, as he's a current research fellow at CARES, and he also completed his PhD in chemical engineering through CARES and with NUS. So during his PhD, Vishvak focused on integrating machine learning into the modelling of electrochemical energy systems. And after his PhD, he joined a startup incubator to commercialise the algorithms developed during his PhD, and he also co-founded a company. So today Vishvak's going to share his experience in the startup incubator, which was based in Singapore. So whenever you're ready, Vishvak, you can share your slides, but no rush.
Yeah, sure.
Do you want to take questions throughout, or would you prefer people to send them at the end or ask at the end?
I'm okay with either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, feel free to stop me in between as well. I don't mind.
Okay.
Or yeah, towards the end should also be okay.
Great.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this talk today. The title is about incubators in Singapore's startup landscape. And I'll basically give an overview of the different types of incubators that are available in Singapore for you to explore, and how to get into one of those, and what to do, what not to do, and just a brief picture. And yeah, like I mentioned, feel free to stop at any time, stop me at any time, and this can be more like a discussion rather than me just presenting. All right. Yeah, so first of all, let's dive a bit deep into what are incubators and what are accelerators. The key difference here is that incubators focus more on the early stage of any idea or a product or anything for that matter, and you don't necessarily have to have a company to join an incubator. But accelerators are focused more towards pushing the existing businesses to the next level, basically. And here in an incubator, you can join to either find new partners that you may need, or mentorship towards what to do and what not to do before starting a business or while starting a business. Whereas in an accelerator, it's more about the best business practices and how to expand into, either locally or even globally. If so, there are different market segments that you can enter in the future, and how to do that, and what to keep in mind, what not to do, and things like that. Oh, another key difference is the time frame that you would spend at an incubator and an accelerator. So for an incubator, it's slightly longer, and it can, depending on the program, it can be either a few months, typically around 6 months, to even a year or so. And there are programs that last between 24 months to 36 months even. But typically an accelerator would last for a few weeks to a couple of months or something like that, or a few months, usually about 10 weeks, 12 weeks, and things like this, to give you a power-packed session of a lot of information, basically. And what are the different types of incubators that are out there? It is so incubators that focus on ideation, that focus on launch, and focus on growth. We'll go a bit deeper into what these terms mean, and what are the incubators in Singapore that specialize in each of this phase. And if you look at it, this is basically the different stages that any person would take while forming a company. You may have something that is coming out of your research, and then you have to ideate as to what to do with this research product, and how do I market it, or is it something that people would want to buy, or how do I sort of wrap it up into a product if it is an early stage research. And the launch is the next phase where you go and test it out and in the market and see if what does the market tell you. Do people want it? Are they willing to pay money for it? And then after you've done all this, you have a rough proof of concept, and then you form a company out of it and you grow the company. So this is the typical stages that anyone would take while forming a company. And there are different incubators that specialize in each stage. So first, in the ideation phase, these incubators would offer you a space to bounce ideas off each other in a very big or a reasonably sized peer group. So you can bounce off ideas, test different ideas, eliminate different ideas, and you can basically refine what you have in your head based on what vision you see for your research or for your product, and how do you get from just a rough picture in your head to something that is more structured. And the main idea of the ideation phase incubators is to inspire you, to educate you with the basic concepts, and also preliminary validation, because you would be put in a group of peers with different levels of experience and from different fields as well. So this is a very good space to sort of pitch what you have to a multidisciplinary crowd. And that can be pretty useful because you get a lot of perspectives from people that are not in your domain. And maybe people from your domain find whatever you're talking about to be very simple or straightforward, but someone from a completely different domain, say like from a financial background or from economics or something, they would not see this as a great idea, and for XYZ reasons. So how do you, it is very good to get these perspectives right in the beginning. So either you can work towards it or eliminate and basically develop your idea further so that you have a more mature vision. And these are a few examples of the incubators in Singapore that specialize in ideation phase. The next would be the launch, where you actually work on the product development and you test your product in the market by having, say, by building a prototype or having pilot partners, and you reach out to different companies in the real world. And this requires a lot of thick skin, actually. And this is the time where you make use of your contacts, or if not, get on the phone and make those cold calls, and you get a solid customer feedback. And with this customer feedback, you either mold your product or you get to test your hypothesis. And so these incubators who specialize in launch would help you to start this process to develop this into a more structured product, and also get you to launch the company. And in this phase, you would actually form a real company. You would incorporate a company, and with that company's name, you would go and test your product in the market. And this is where you get the proof of concept, whether people are willing to pay for your product or not. And there are several incubators that specialize in launch, because this is the phase where they can actually source good talent, and at the same time they also get maximum returns on the investment that they put in. So as you can see, there are many more incubators specializing in the launch phase, because this is also where you start doing something that is real rather than um, an inception that you have in your head. And you can see both private and also academic institution based incubators here, and some are more focused on deep tech or deep technology, and some don't require a deep tech, and I'll explain these terms in the subsequent parts of the presentation. And naturally, the next step is for you to grow. And now you have a reasonably established business that is known by a few people. At least you have, say, a few steady customers that are willing to pay you some money. Even if you're not making great bucks, it's good to know that someone is willing to pay you at least some money for what you're offering, because that itself is a big thing. And so when you have a reasonably established business, how do you jump to the next level? How do you pass these multiple hoops very quickly so that you can expand quickly, you can get more revenue, and how do you establish your name in the field as well? And this is what these incubators focus on. So getting you that recognition that you need and giving you this additional funding that you need to basically blast off, and also support you in this growth. And the key idea here is to grow and grow and grow. Yeah. And these are a few incubators that specialize in growth phase. And when you actually come to the growth phase, you would start seeing more accelerators rather than incubators, because accelerators are the ones that would get you to the next phase very quickly, and you already have a basic foundation that is laid out in the previous phases. And these programs assume that you have a basic foundation of what to do and what not to do, a basic foundation of the good business practices and so on. So their education to you would be more focused on how do you say grow your customer base from say 5 customers to 50, and how do you if say you're in Singapore, or if you're specializing in Southeast Asia, how do you go to the next global market? How do you and what are the challenges that you may face when you expand globally, and what are the new challenges that you may face when you grow from say a 5 customer to a 50 customer company? And these are the kind of ideas that go into when you're in the growth phase. And to summarize, there are about 100 incubators and accelerators to scale startups in Singapore. And these are a few basic examples of the different incubators. And at the same time, there are incubators that are backed by corporate institutions as well. So they have, so these corporate backed incubators or accelerators would have a requirement of the vision to be aligned with what they're doing. And at the same time, they offer a great advantage of their customer base. They would even let you test in their established customer base and their platforms. And also they would have enough funding to kick you off to this next phase, basically. And the pertinent question that even I had when I was submitting my thesis was, so from a research environment or from a research lab, where do I go? There are so many options available. So which incubator do I choose? And typically, I think the crowd that we have is mainly from create and a strong academic and a research background. So typically, when you're from a very strong research background, one thing is that you need to keep in mind that you need to select an incubator that specializes in deep tech. because they understand what deep tech actually needs, and they also have networks that understand how deep tech companies work, and and they also have experience to mentor deep tech companies, because when people talk about deep tech, it typically means that you spent about 5 years of your life working on this particular topic. And so typically after a PhD or usually a graduate program followed by a few years of research would already constitute you as a deep tech founder. And usually after research, you join incubators that focus on either ideation or launch, because you need to get this clarity of thought in terms of selling, or in terms of wrapping up your research idea or your research outcome into a product that can actually be marketed, or a product that people will be willing to buy and will be willing to pay money for. Because your research may be amazing, but it if that is not of the need to for the market at this point, then there's no point. But that doesn't mean that your research is bad. It just means that it is not at a stage that is that can be commercialized right now. So how do you make this research outcome into something that can be commercialized, is something that these incubators typically specialize on. And as you can see, these are a few examples of incubators that specialize in deep tech. I would also say Antler specializes. Antler also has deep tech, but the thing is that Antler has a lot of Gen tech companies in addition to deep tech. Gen tech meaning general technology. So anything that you see as an e-market platform like Shopee or Lazada, etc. So those companies would be classified as Gen tech. And any company that uses, say, AI or neural networks, or something that came out of, like for example, what Nick does in CARES, which is a company that manufactures nanoparticles. So these are typical examples of deep tech, because you already have this advantage of technology that is being developed from scratch. And the network of VC is very essential when you go into an incubator, and I would touch on these points a bit later. And VCs are the people, venture capitalists are the ones that you raise money from. And all these incubators basically prepare you to raise seed stage funding. And that is why VCs experienced in investing in deep tech companies is actually very important at that stage. And when you join a deep tech incubator, what happens? What sort of an environment are you pushed into? I would talk here from my experience at EF, for example, but from what I've seen and what I've read, most of the other incubators also follow a similar model. And there is usually an application process that checks your vision. What vision do you have for yourself, for your idea? And most of these incubators don't even require you to have a solid idea right now, because one key point here is that you would meet people from different backgrounds. And so how do you generate ideas together is also another thing. And that is why it is not absolutely essential that you enter an incubator with an idea. You can come up with ideas by talking to people from multiple backgrounds, combining your experiences, and so forth. And what is your motivation, your personal motivation and your career motivation, and articulation. And this is key, because how do you explain your research to your grandma? This is a question that typically comes up, because how do you articulate what you do, something that is very complicated, to someone that is looking to buy out of you? And if the person doesn't understand what you're selling, then you can't sell your product. So this is key. And they do give you a lot of tips and education based on how to articulate your idea more clearly as well. And typically, when you join an incubator, they have two phases. The first phase for 3 months called the form, and the second phase for 3 months called the launch. And at the end of the form phase, you would have something called an internal investment committee meeting. So this is where you pitch your company to your incubator, who is also an investor. So their investment, so for example, EF invests $75,000 for 10% equity, and Antler invests about up to 100,000 Singapore dollars, if I'm not wrong, also for 10% equity. And during the form phase, EF pays a stipend of about $5,000 per month, and Antler pays a stipend of about $3,000 per month. And so during the form phase, you get to form teams, you generate, test, and iterate ideas. You very quickly eliminate ideas as well. And they specialize on educating you on the good practices of forming a business. And they give you different tips on how to refine even your product, the idea that you have for the product, and how to talk to your customers, how to approach potential customers, and how to pitch your idea to different people, including their internal investment committee team. And once you pass the investment committee meeting or the pitch, then you get awarded the 75,000. And typically about 40% of the people go through this phase, as in only about 40% of the entire candidates that were chosen for form would enter the launch phase. And that again lasts for another 3 months, where you would incorporate your company right away, and you build your business proposition, a well-rounded business proposition. You build your vision for the company, and the key that they would try to achieve is to make you market investable, because now they have invested $75,000 in you, and they are an investor. So now they start backing you more than being an evaluation kind of entity. And during the launch phase, you would also get mentorship from their internal network of people. And this is when you start testing the waters. This is when you start testing a hypothesis in the real world, where you actually build a product and start having pilot trials with your customers and get their feedback, and basically try to get revenue as well. So if you get a revenue, then that's well and good. And at the end of 3 months, you would have something called a demo day in most of the incubators. And this is where they put you in front of their network of venture capitalists and the other investors that are available. And after that, you would have multiple meetings with the different investors, and you pitch your company to them. But in parallel, you would be working on your company as well. It's not like you would stop a particular process when you get to the other. Everything has to happen simultaneously. So the typical equity cost that any incubator takes, from my experience, is that they take about 10 to 12% in the early stage. But when you go into an accelerator, this number can be much lower, or sometimes they have different conditions rather than equity when you go through an accelerator. And how do you form a team? Because this is key for your business, because you're choosing a partner almost for a life, basically. So it is about choosing a any partner, for example. So it is as serious as that, but at the same time, you need to be judicious in the kind of skills that you look for in the other person. And typically you would look for complementary skill set, which is pretty straightforward, but the definition of complementary is a bit deeper here. So if you do experimental work, choosing someone that knows how to do theory or how to code is not the necessary complementary skill that you're looking at. Since most of us are from a very strong research background, what I've learned is that you can greatly benefit from choosing a person that has a very strong business experience or a financial background or building companies, etc. So the idea here is to basically choose people with skills that can not be very easily hired or is too expensive to be hired. So for example, the experience of a person cannot be bought, or uh, the skill, like people specializing in a completely different domain is something that can be very expensive to be hired, in at least in the initial phases. So this is the kind of skill set that you would look at. And how do you basically pitch what you have to the next person as well? Because the next person should also understand what you're doing so that they would be willing to partner with you, because they need to have a very clear understanding of what's going on so that they can build it with you. And so for that, I would very strongly urge you to look at something called the pyramid principle. And I've given the link here to be able to follow, to pitch your idea to the next person so that you capture their attention very easily. And the most important thing here is that when things don't work out, don't be hesitant, or don't think, think carefully, but don't be scared or don't be nervous to break up. And it's never personal. And the next person understands that too. And you need to do what is good for you and for your company, uh, rather than thinking about what might the other person feel, because um, it is more important that you do it in as early as possible so that you don't get dragged on for much longer as well. And in EF or in most incubators that I've seen, they actually celebrate breakups. It's not it's anything but what you think. They actually celebrate breakups, and they encourage it when even they see that there are things that are not going well. All right. And after you form a team and after you basically clear the IC successfully, then what happens in the next stage, which is the launch stage? Here, before you can get a hang of what's going on, things move very fast. In the very first week after you clear your IC, you get the money in your bank account and you basically incorporate your company right away. And most of the incubators have tie-ups with different agencies in Singapore to assist you with this process, and it's not too complicated. And they would assist you with incorporation of a company, finding your company secretary, and also drawing up your constitution. And in addition to that, they have a dedicated launch team, and there'll be a person that will be assigned to you as well for your weekly sort of progress update and stuff like that. And at any point, you get access to most of the people that are there in the network, including the higher ups of the incubator. And also they have dedicated venture partners who have been very successful in a particular industry, or people who have built their company from ground up to a success and now have retired, or someone with a very deep expertise with a particular field. So these are the type of people that are sort of available as venture partners. And one of these people will also be assigned to you, and you can have meetings with them, and basically they would offer their mentorship to you as well. And this is a quick sneak peek of what happens at EF, for example. So week 12 to week 16 is when all the incorporation and the basic product and these kind of things take place. And from week 16 to week 24 is when you get a ton of information about how to build a business, basically. So what is go to market, and they refine your business model. They look at your financial modeling, market size, how to evaluate a reasonable market size, how to evaluate a realistic market size, and etc. How do you identify competition? And then with the entire information here, you would basically prepare your investor pitch as well. And by week 24, you would basically start pitching to the investors. So investor day is the demo day that I mentioned, where in an ideal world, you would go on a stage and have a huge presentation of your company in front of, say, about 100 venture capitalists or so. And they can then choose to whether talk to you more, and like they would have subsequent meetings with you, basically. But now, because of COVID, the last 2 years, it has been happening virtually, where they have a professional video shoot of your company and about you, and this is presented to the investors. So by joining an incubator, what is the good that you can get out of it? This is pretty great for first-time founders because they give you a lot of information in bite-sized proportions. So you get to consume a lot of information very quickly and very effectively as well. And there is guidance for you, and there is also support for you. And this can be very difficult otherwise. And also you get to choose a partner, which is pretty good, because building an entire company by yourself can also be challenging in most of the times. Yeah. So having someone who can take care of the business and the financials while you look at the product is something great, which can allow you to spend more time on your product, which can allow you to spend more time on forming your vision, your mission, and also getting the product from ground up very quickly. And one other good thing about Singapore is that Enterprise Singapore or Enterprise SG also participates. They have an option to participate in your seed investment, which and they typically go 1-to-1 ratio, which means that typically if you raise a $1 million seed round, then they can go up to $500,000. So this will take a bit of load out of the other investors. So this makes things easier for you to raise a complete seed round. And another piece of information here is that in Singapore, the typical seed round is between 1 million to 1.5 to a maximum of 2 million when it requires lab space and hardware and these kind of things. Like, for example, biotech or pharma kind of startups would require about 2 million. But if you're more of a software business, you're looking at $1 million. And if you're a hardware business, then you're looking at 1.5 to $2 million. And if someone else, say a government entity like Enterprise SG, is willing to contribute 50% of this particular round, then this takes a bit of stress out of the venture capitalists, and they become more willing to invest in your company. And this is available in Singapore. The other thing is that if you're a foreigner, then you get something called an entry pass, which makes it easier for you to open a company in Singapore, and you don't need to hire a local director. You can be a local director with the entry pass, and without it, it's not possible. Like according to the Singaporean law, if you want to found a company here, then you need a local director and you need a local company secretary as well. But with an entry pass, you can become a local director, and most of the incubators would assist you in getting your entry pass. So when you join an incubator, they would be applying for an entry pass for you, and this is typically valid for 1 year and can be renewed based on your company's performance, and also um, yeah, mainly based on your company's performance. Yes. And you have a pretty good VC network, both local and global network that specialize in Singapore. And it is also easier to reach out to the rest of the world from Singapore. And you get mentorship from very experienced people like the venture partners, and you get to quickly test your hypothesis and very effectively as well. You go out to the real world and you see what works and what doesn't work, and you get to make those pivots very efficiently. And the incubators basically provide you all kinds of framework for you to do this. So what is the bad in all this? If you're not a Singaporean or a PR, if you're a foreigner, then you are not eligible for government grants. And this can be crucial for deep tech companies, because things can be a bit harder in the beginning and you would require more time to grow from ground up. And this may require some academic funding or some government grants, which you're not eligible for if you're a foreigner. Sorry. So naturally, VC funding becomes the only option, or one of the major options for non-Singaporeans and PRs. And your compete and about 150 VCs that are active in Singapore, only about 10%, which is roughly about 15 VCs specialize in seed stage companies. But this is not a small number, but still you are pretty much confined to raising funding from only the venture capitalists. And this is what I was mentioning earlier as well, where the expertise of a VC investing in a deep tech companies becomes significant here, because if you're talking to only about 15 VCs, and if no one has an idea of how a deep tech company works, or what are the kind of challenges that you go through, what are the kind of support that they need to provide you, then it becomes very difficult for you to raise money. But luckily in Singapore, at least, there are quite a few venture capitalists who understand the sort of dynamics and the challenges that exist in deep tech companies. And especially when you go through a deep tech specialized incubator, then they have networks they have very strong networks in fact with these venture capitalists. So it makes your life a bit easier. And so what is the ugly? There's no ugly. Worst case, you don't raise an investment, but the experience that you receive through this by taking this leap and stays with you, and you get to test your idea in a real world, basically. And also you get a very clear idea of what people are willing to pay money for. That's all for the talk. And here are a few useful links for you to go through, which gives you a list of all the incubators available in Singapore, compilations of what different incubators specialize in, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vishvak. It was great to hear your talk, and yeah, I feel really lucky that we had such a comprehensive overview of all the different incubators in Singapore. And just for those who aren't familiar with EF, I thought I should point out that it stands for Entrepreneur First. Because if you Google EF Singapore, you get like education first, and it's a little bit hazy. So I think the website is joinef.com, but if you just Google Entrepreneur First Singapore, then you'll get it. And kind of on that topic, how did you decide which incubator to go to, or did you just apply to a few and see where you got in?
For my case, I actually applied only to Entrepreneur First. One was because I sort of knew about them earlier, and also when I looked at different incubators, this is the one that suited best for me, at least, because the kind of education that they give you in the form phase especially is pretty solid here, and they have a pretty good support system as well.
Great.
And since they have a huge network across the world, not just in Singapore, you can get assistance from literally all the other companies within EF as well, which can actually be very useful.
Great. Yeah, that sounds really good. I know they came to CARES and did a talk, didn't they? And they seemed really onto it, really supportive. Great. Now, does anyone have any other questions? You can just put it in the chat or ask, turn your microphone off and ask.
Yeah.
Hey, Vishvak.
Hello.
Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I think I didn't realize that there are so many different incubators and accelerators in the system. So, yeah, I guess there are two questions. From a research standpoint, it seems like a lot of these are very, like they have a set pace, you know, it's like 3 months to do this, 3 months to do that.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is how does that pacing work? You know, because if Singapore is, you know, interested in deep tech, you know, it requires some pretty deep time as well. So how does that pacing work? And the second one is, you know, taking that into consideration, how do you choose the right accelerator or incubator, given that there's so many?
Yeah. Typically, so let me start with your first question. So typically, when you look at the pace of how things happen, or when you look at these deep tech incubators, they actually understand that that certain deep tech companies require time. And so, for example, in EF, what they let you do is that you don't necessarily have to participate in the demo day of your cohort, but you can continue working on your company for another 6 months or a year and participate in the next demo day, for example. So they do let you do that. And especially with hardware companies, this is what most of the hardware companies do. In fact, about 90% of them, they do this. And for example, EAF has tie-up with another incubator called Hacks, which is in Hong Kong. And they sort of co-invest in you, and they give you the necessary expertise around the hardware business, and also even space and so on. On the other hand, when you look at Intuitive, NUS Enterprise, and these kind of academic incubators, they are very well experienced with this sort of a timeline. And so they don't have a very rushed or a very compact timeline like the other private incubators, because they do understand that research takes time. And so it is up to you in terms of the support that you would need in terms of building your business, whether you would need a co-founder right away, or you can find a co-founder through different channels later, or you can bring in a co-founder from your network. And how much assistance do you need from the business side of things, and how much assistance do you need in terms of defining your go-to-market strategy and the other business side of marketing your product, basically. Because the more structured programs like EF, Antler, and these kind of incubators specialize more on that in comparison to NUS Enterprise and Intuitive, in my experience. But having said that, you do get access to the different professors or any other contacts that the NUS Enterprise has. So that is more of an ad hoc or an informal basis mentorship that happens as well. And I think this answers sort of both your questions.
Yeah, I think so. So it seems like, yeah, they're used to handling sort of technologies that are quite early. So yeah, I guess then probably better for people in universities to sort of stick with their university incubator if they can. But I realize, yeah, that's sometimes not always the case that you can do that. So.
But I mean, like so for example, if you're building a software business, then it is pretty much possible to do in the outside incubator as well. Software in terms of research. And also, for example, there were at least 3 hardware businesses in my cohort, I think. One was developing a biodegradable plastic. One was a lithium-ion battery recycling company, and the other one is a pharma company. And the pharma company is going for the investor day in the next cohort because they require a lot of time. And then the lithium-ion battery recycling company went just a few months back. And the other company, I think they went a few months back as well. So they do, but even in the meantime, they keep offering you the support, and you keep interacting with the mentors, and they find you, even if you need more funds to continue, they have other options for you to raise, like a bridge fund or a small amount of funding, like 100 or 200K from angel investors, because most of these venture partners act as angel investors as well. And they are willing to invest, say, 100, 200K in you. And this can keep your runway for the next few months, basically.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for that insight.
No problem. Let's see another question here.
Yes.
By getting, okay, not really. And also, this is not, it is not direct equity that they take initially. So this is also, this is pre-money valuation. And this has no say, or this has no effect in you raising your seed evaluation. But the typical seed evaluations that I've seen is between 3.8 to 4.5, and at the higher side of the average, around 4.7 to maximum 5 million. I mean, those are the post-money valuations that you're looking at during seed fund, when you are raising seed money. So you would typically give up about 25% of your business almost when you after you raise your seed funding. Does that answer your question? Cheers.
Does anyone have anything else,
Vishvak?
Lewis? Yes.
Yes, thanks so much for your presentation. I learned really a lot. I also didn't realize there is so many incubators and we see it here in Singapore. It's really surprised me. So one naive question is during the forming part, so do you do it for as a full-time training or just a part-time, or do you have to pay for that?
For the form phase, you mean?
Yeah.
So you actually get paid to do that. So so the incubator pays you a stipend to be a part of the program. And so, for example, in EF they pay $5,000 per month, and in Antler they pay $3,000 per month during the form phase. And this is definitely full time, if not more than full time.
Okay.
Yeah. Because
it's
there is a
again. I saw this kind of training. So like something like business training. I thought we should pay it by ourselves.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Because there is a very steep learning curve involved, and there are people from all kinds of backgrounds that are there. So people who have say 15 years of work experience are also there with you in this program, in your cohort. All right. And there are people who can have who have already founded 1 or 2 companies and have exited. They are also here because this is a very good place to find co-founders. And also there is a preliminary screening that is already being done by the incubator. So you can have a certain degree of confidence that the talent that is coming in is not too bad, basically. Yeah, so that is why they actually give you an incentive for you to participate in this program. And this they have to do to everyone and not just to people who are more experienced, right? That is why they have a stipend of a few $1,000s typically for you to go through the first form phase. And after that, so a maximum of about 40% of the people would go to the next phase, basically. And so the companies that go to the next phase would get $75,000 each. And so each, as in like for each company, not for each person. And typically they advise a team of 2. So for each company, there are 2 people with 50-50 split. In special cases, there are 3 co-founders as well, but usually it's 2. And each company gets $75,000 for your launch phase, and you can use the money however you want. And you can take a salary from it also, and you can take how much ever you think is a good salary for you. Some people use the money entirely for the product development and take very little for them to survive. Other people who don't have a lot of overheads can take a salary from it, because it is their brains that is basically being used. Yeah.
So for the co-founders, they will assign the co-founders to you, or you find the co-founders by yourself during the form phase?
You find by yourself. You can ask them for assistance, but they try to be as objective as possible with that. So you can go to them. So you have like a person assigned from the incubator with whom you have like weekly updates and stuff like that. So to discuss your progress. And so with this person, you can sort of discuss, oh, I've shortlisted XYZ, and these are the pros and cons that I've evaluated, but I don't know whom to go with. And then they would ask you questions to point you in the right direction, but they won't make the decision for you. End of the day, you will make the decision for yourself. And that is why when you make this decision for yourself, also, it is very important to keep in mind that there is no problem to break up.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yes.
And typically, at least in EF, you have to form your team within the first 8 weeks. And so you have 1 month to prepare for the investor, the internal committee meeting, basically the investment committee meeting. So you have 1 month to prepare at least. So you have to form the team in the first 8 weeks for sure. If you don't form a team, then you can't go to the next phase, but they will still pay you for that month. So you will get that $15,000 for sure.
Okay.
That's the thing. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So also another question is just now you mentioned some incubators without corporate background, like for example, NTU ETIF. So you don't need to make sure your business is in line with their
No.
expectation. But what is the expectation of the incubators like Intuitive?
Intuitive, I mean, they don't have a particular intention. They are there to, so like any other incubator, right, which is not corporate backed, they don't care about what exactly you work on. They care about whether what you work on is investable or can be made investable or not, can be commercialized or not, basically. And that, and also since these academic based incubators focus on deep tech, they also care about how defensible your technology is. So how easy is for someone else to copy your work? So how long does it take another company to do this from scratch? So this is something that they look at as well. So you can fortify your defensibility by having patents on your work, or but that doesn't always mean that it's the best option. Like what Joy was mentioning last talk as well. So patents are not necessarily the way to go. For example, for my company, we actually found out that patenting it was not the best idea because it was mostly my algorithms. So if I patent it, then anyone can change just a few lines and they can basically reproduce it. So what we were doing was to keep it as a trade secret. And so there are several strategies like this that you can adopt. And like the academic backed incubators like Intuitive or in NUS Enterprise, they have a very good expertise and experience with technology protection and evaluation of technology as well. So they can be very useful in that front.
Okay. So do they also provide finance support, like some investment? And
yes.
If yes, do they also, if yes, do they also take some equities from your company?
Yeah. So they typically take some equity out of it. But they also have a few other arrangements, which I don't remember exactly at this point. But you can basically ask them about it, and they're very happy to talk to you about these things. And you can even look at NES grip and these kind of things to kind of get an idea of what they want in return as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, typically because like for example, when you're from NUS or NTU, your patent is owned by the university. So you basically license the patent for your company from the university because the university owns your patent.
So the university won't own the patent, right?
Sorry?
The university will own the patent or not own the patent?
They will. So typically that is a key thing that you sign when you enter universities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think we have time for just one more question before we wrap up. Lewis, you look like you're ready to ask something before.
Yeah, I was going to ask a quick question. Thanks, Vish, for the presentation. Very interesting. I was wondering, like, how does it work in terms when you're starting to share your ideas in terms of the intellectual property behind it? So, I mean, it's a time that you're brainstorming a lot of things. I mean, is there some sort of like agreement that like the ideas would stay there? Because I don't know what stops someone that didn't become a partner with you to go and try to implement your idea later on.
That's that's a good point, and it can happen very well.
Okay.
So yeah, it can happen, but the thing is that that is why, and especially in deep tech, how difficult is it for them to copy? So for example, something that you have developed for over your research of 2 years or something, that is why you at the same like you don't go into a lot of details. At the same time, you're not too vague. And this is why I recommended the pyramid principle, because what you pitch to them is what you're capable of or what your product can do, rather than, so you ask the what and the whys, but not the how, basically. So you don't give out the how. How do you do it is like after a certain degree of confidence that has been established. But until then, but It is sort of a gray area, because when the next person wants the confidence to partner with you, he wants to understand to a certain degree of how things are done as well. So you can basically point them to say your thesis, your papers, your patents, etc. So these are basically evidences of what you're proposing is actually not complete bollocks, basically, and there is some stuff behind it. So and especially when it comes out of research, we always have something like this in hand. So it makes our lives a bit easier than other ideas.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you very much, Vishvak, and thanks for taking our questions as well.